I was sitting at home and I got this wonderful call from Dennis Glover about an artist that I had never heard of, Doris Lindo, Dolly Lewis. And it sounded very interesting, and I did a little bit of research and wound up taking a trip down to see Denis and his wife, Sydney, and discover this amazing cache of paintings that were totally exciting for a woman painting back in the late 20s. Oh, I think that Doris Lewis deserves lots of attention that she didn't get. Clearly she had some success over her lifetime, but like many women painters of the time, sort of under the shadows of all the men that were painting, and she was not having any of that. The symbolism that crops up, within those paintings is pretty amazing. It was several years later before some of the museums started to take notice, but once they did, after the show out in the LA County Museum in Wonderland, which traveled Mexico and Canada, great catalog. People started looking, when they saw her work in context with Frida Kahlo and other great painters.
One of my favorite paintings of hers, a surrealistic painting, is one of a little girl sitting on a chair, and on the table beside her is a music box with birds in it. It's shaped like a bird cage, and that music box was in my grandmother's house, and it still played. So it was I loved seeing that music box there. And the child is interesting because she's so sober. All her children are very, very, maybe not sad, but they're very serious. And I don't know why. But the one I really like best is one where there's a foot in the water. I don't know, I love water and I love looking at that foot. It interests me quite a lot. And of course all the plants around the foot are plants I recognize, so that makes it good too. She went to the museum school for about a year, but she didn't like it. They were way too stuffy for her. She simply couldn't bear it. So she decided to go to New York. And she had a teacher there, Byron Thomas, who is a painter and has done some very nice work. And I think she studied with him. I'm not sure about this, but they were good friends, and she lived in New York and studied in New York. And I think that's where she may have learned about the Surrealism. We weren't aware that she was important. And we got a call from the Los Angeles County Museum of Art that they wanted a curator to come out. She was absolutely enthralled with everything she found, and she chose one of my mother's pictures to be in a very special exhibit that was held at LACMA, and it went to 3 museums. They had it for, I don't know, 6 months at LACMA, and then it went to Quebec for the whole summer, and then it went to Mexico City. But we don't know of any other woman surrealist who painted as early as that.
Well, I think it was very much like Lewis. She was sort of a perfectionist. And if she had a whole bunch of paintings she didn't like, she didn't care. She just didn't want them around. And I guess I'd say it's typical of her. She just makes these radical decisions. For example, she owned a house in the Bass River in South Yarmouth, and she just sold it right from under us. My wife was an only child, and the house was gone. She just made these instantaneous decisions. The same thing happened with the move from realism in 1930 to surrealism. It's like going in opposite directions. And she did it literally overnight. The people who are curators are really interested in the quality of the work, in the pioneering nature of it, in the fact that it's a woman surrealist. But collectors, I find very often, are not discriminating about the paintings. They want an investment. And unless a painter, say like Andy Warhol, has a whole lot of publicity and a lot of famous people in New York, they tend not to be that interested. There's a dichotomy between a curator who's really interested in art and an investor who really just wants to make an investment. Obviously there are exceptions to that, but that's what I found to be the general rule. I knew she was an artist and she did artwork, but in her home she didn't hang any of her things at all. The one exception is a little landscape that was in the back of her husband's closet. These were all tucked away. I think one reason is that she might have been, first of all, she didn't want publicity. She was at heart a New Englander, and just didn't want to talk about what she was doing. She was very private, even with her own daughter, and certainly with me. I was an outlander. The thing that was really surprising was to discover in 1995 something like 60 or 65 pieces of artwork that we really were totally unaware of. They were either under her bed in a drawer, hidden in some closet somewhere, and we had a hard time ourselves really getting our minds about minds around what was going on. Our thought was, and our thought still is, that she may well be the very first North American female surrealist. We can't find any others. But of course, curators are hesitant to, make that kind of judgment because locally, something might suddenly show up that is a surrealist female painter, either in New England, in her case, New England and New York, or somewhere else. So there may be things that are hidden somewhere, but as far as we know, our evidence is that she's probably the first. I think seeing the breadth and depth and innovative nature of her artwork, and the fact that she changed quite frequently. She once said to me, Picasso's done everything already, not to compare with Picasso, but Picasso did that. He'd suddenly go from the blue period to something totally different, and she did the same thing. Well, it dumbfounded us, first of all, to discover the stuff, and then to have curators flying in literally from all over the country for my mother-in-law, whose work we had essentially never seen. I don't know what she would make of it. I think she'd be dumbfounded, but then she never had any ambition of fame. One of the things I think that's different between Doris Lindo Lewis and some of the other female surrealists, including Frida Kahlo, to whom she's favorably compared, is that there's always something that isn't just shocking. There's something more that's involved in her artwork. They say one reason the Surrealists came about is because of the horrors of the First World War. But we have to note that Lewis's father died in 1919 when she was very young. Suddenly, 10 years later, her stepfather also died. And not long after that, her grandmother died. So she had not only the weight of what happened in the First World War, but also these deaths in her own family. That tended to cause her to have, I think, more depth in her surrealism. It certainly isn't everybody's cup of tea. All of us like pictures of sailboats and flowers and that kind of thing. It's a little jarring to see surrealism. But there's something more in her paintings. And you have to look at them and say, what is she really trying to say? Is she just trying to shock? I think she's not. I think she's trying to say a lot more. And it depends upon where you're coming from, what you see in all of them. If you look at the painting behind me, which I take it you can see, it's called Eden. It's about, it would appear to be Eve putting her foot in the water for the first time. But there's also a shell there. And the shell classically represents the feminine creative principle, to get academic about it. But that's to say that creation wasn't just done by this great masculine God, as you see in the Sistine Chapel ceiling, but it's also a feminine principle that's going on. And that goes all the way back to the painting of Venus on the half shell. That's the sort of Mother Earth creation. And that's some of what this particular painting is about. She also loved botany, and I think there's something in the sense that that to her flowers represented creation, the positive side of creation at any rate, and that may also be considered a feminine side of her at the same time.